Welcome to the Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show. Aaron, welcome to Consulting Leaders.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Let's do this. All right. So tell us the origin story. What got you into consulting after spending so much time in senior positions yourself?
It's funny. I originally went into consulting after being laid off at an organization a number of years ago. And I called a colleague of mine who owned a consulting firm, Galvanized Strategies. And I told her that I had been laid off. And she immediately said, "Why don't you come work for me?" And so literally the next day I started working for her, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to be a consultant. I didn't know if I was going to be able to sell the things that I do well. And it turns out that I was able to. And so I, for 1 year, was a full-time consultant and then was recruited to become a chief at a hospital. And I left consulting sort of on the back burner. I kept it as a side hustle gig and did projects here and there. But the truth is that for all the years that I was back as an executive, I longed to be back as a consultant. And so when I saw an opportunity present itself at the end of 2023 and into 2024, I said, I want to take it from the back burner and move it to the front burner and turn up the heat. And so that's what I decided to do. And so I've been full-time consulting since January of 2024.
Can you tell us a bit more about the problem that you solve right now with Galvanized Consulting?
Yeah, the problem, I solve multiple problems. So I have buckets that I work in. And the number one problem I solve is I help organizations who are in leadership transition. And so maybe they had a sudden release of a CEO, or maybe they had a change in leadership that they were not anticipating, and they didn't have a bench ready to go and step into that role. I step into the role for them. And so I come in, bring in my years of experience, and I help fix challenges. And I help bridge the divide between where they are and where they want to be to hire what you might call a permanent CEO. And so I do that. I also help my clients with public affairs needs. That may be a negative public affairs crisis that they're facing, or it could even be that they haven't received any public affairs and they want some more. And so I step in those. And then I also do a lot of executive coaching. And so I coach executives who are at the early, mid, and senior career level who haven't quite figured out how to get to that next level and want to significantly up their game. They come and talk to me, and I help them figure out how to align the organizational goals with their own professional, educational, and personal goals, and then go and explode out of that.
What does that allow them to do, Aaron? Like, what's the outcome of this? What's the benefit?
The benefit for them, are we talking about the executive clients?
So the problem that you help those executive clients solve, what does that allow them to achieve?
Most of them want freedom in some way. They want the ability to do the things that they are passionate about. And for whatever reason, maybe they've been stuck in middle management or whatever it may be, and they haven't had an opportunity, or they haven't thought intentionally about how to put their best foot forward and how to show others what they're actually capable of. And so I help them map out what that looks like. And that's on the professional level. On the personal level, many of my clients, particularly if they're mid to senior career, want to spend more time with family. And so I help them figure out how to balance excellence in performance at work with excellence in performance at home, and how to be with their family more, and how to spend time doing that, and how to make as much of an impact at home as they make in their business world. And I feel sometimes that we as executives, when we are working, we work so hard and we almost give the best version of ourselves to work, the most patient version, the most energetic version we give to work. And then by the time we get home, we're so tired, we're so worn out that our family gets what's left over. And hopefully what's left over is still pretty good, but for too many people, it's not as good as it could be. And so I help them figure out what's the balance of those things.
Who do you help? Like senior executive, but what does that mean? Do you have a specific industry, a specific niche, a specific industry size, company size? Like, who do you work with specifically, Aaron?
Well, my expertise is in healthcare and nonprofits, but I have worked with executive clients across a wide variety of industries. The same principles apply no matter where you're at. How you approach things, how you plan, thoughtfulness, intentionality, strategy, focused performance, all those things apply no matter where you're at. I just happen to have expertise in healthcare and nonprofit world.
This is very interesting because I think most people would have answered, "Oh, I'm industry agnostic." What made you focus on healthcare nonprofits?
Well, I got into healthcare early on in my career. My first main job when I was a teenager was delivering medication for a pharmacy. So I delivered medication to elderly folks in their homes. And it was amazing because it taught me how to speak to elderly patients or seniors. It taught me what medications were for, and it taught me disease processes. And my next job, I was an emergency medical technician. I worked on ambulances for about 7 years. And that was when I elevated. So I took what I learned as honestly a delivery driver talking to folks, and I applied it in emergency medical services. And I was already sort of ahead of the curve because I already knew what all the medications were for. And I knew all these things. I knew how to talk to folks. And I excelled as an emergency medical technician and was the first thing that I felt like I truly excelled at. And I feel like it sort of unlocked in me some innate potential. And from that, it just grew this career in healthcare. And ultimately, at the age of 22, I had sort of a life-changing scenario. I had heart surgery when I was 22 years old. I was diagnosed with a congenital heart defect, and I had to have heart surgery. And my experience as a patient changed the way I looked at everything, my life and my career and everything. And I decided that I wanted to no longer work in the reactive side of medicine, responding at 3 o'clock in the morning to a heroin overdose. And I wanted to prevent heroin overdoses before they happened. And so I got very interested in healthcare policy. And I went to college while I was working on the ambulance to study healthcare policy. And then I ended up working in healthcare policy for 7 years, went to graduate school, got a master's in healthcare management, and then went to work for hospitals. And so it's sort of just everything's kind of built upon the other before. I'm giving a speech soon about non-linear career ladders. Everyone thinks that a ladder is just straight up, but I always say that it's actually more like the video game Donkey Kong, where you go up and you move over and you come back and you maybe go back again, you move up, and all the while there's a giant gorilla throwing barrels at you, trying to land on your head. And so having heart surgery, realizing certain things, those are all barrels falling on us. And so I have always focused in healthcare. I focus in different areas of healthcare, and my initiative to work on things more proactively led me to nonprofits. And so I have served on many nonprofit boards, board of directors, some for as long as 20 years. And I took those opportunities not to just sit on the board and make decisions here and there, but to become actively involved in their efforts and their engagements and their initiatives, and took leadership roles. And in the process of doing that for 20 plus years, I learned a lot about nonprofits. And so that's where healthcare and nonprofit came out of it. But I'm so involved in the business community around here. And if you go to graduate school and you study business, you know a lot about businesses, and I pay attention to a lot of those things. And many of my colleagues and people that I've trained in career development have come from a wide array of industries. So all of those things have fed not only my ability to be able to take my particular approach and help it apply for people across industries, but also it's elevated my interest in multiple industries.
Very mission driven.
Yes,
I like that.
Very much so.
So that's going to be the senior leaders in the healthcare nonprofit industry then. Is it like executive directors in the nonprofits, or like CEO level people? How do you decide who you work with specifically?
Well, I'm pretty open to working with no matter who they are and what level they're at. Oftentimes, I work with people who are at what I might call the lower levels of an organization, who have profound innate capabilities, but haven't quite figured out how to harness it in the right direction. And so there's a lot of those people that I've helped. And I've helped people. I start working with people when they're 19 years old and in college, and now they're senior executives at places. Or I engage with people when they are languishing in middle management somewhere. They've been a manager for 15 or 20 years, and they haven't quite figured out how to become a director or an executive director or a vice president or a C-suite. And so I help them figure out sort of, okay, what is the cliff that they're sitting on? What's the cliff on the other side of the gorge that they want to get to? And how do you build the bridge between here and there? And the bridge is about raw materials, skills, tools, and a plan. And so we work on putting all those pieces together. We do an assessment of where you're at right now. What skills, tools, plan do you have? What raw materials do you have? And what are you missing? And then our focused effort is building those skills, tools, materials, and plan to get to the other side. And then it's about what I call ferocious execution. It's about you execute with a ferocity that most people are not accustomed to. And when you do that, and I think you have to do that, it shows the people around you that you mean business and you're serious and you're working towards these things. But it also, if you have been labeled as a certain way for 15 or 20 years, it turns you into a new level. And people go, oh, this person's really serious. Maybe we should keep an eye on this person for executive roles as they pop up. And much more often than not, actually almost universally, it works that way.
Amen to that. How do you, so you spent your entire life being mission driven and in that space, more or less. Today, Aaron, how do you, and you guys at Galvanized Consulting, market, brand, how do you get new leads through the door?
This is a good question. It's all pretty much word of mouth. So I have worked for organizations where I've been the face of an organization. I've worked on a lot of public facing initiatives. I've won a lot of awards over the course of my career. And so people see that and they say, oh, I want some of that to come here. Sometimes they choose me because I'm 99% the bridge builder, as we just talked about. I help people build bridges from where they are to where they want to be. That might be a person, that might be an organization. But I'm also a person that you put in front of the camera if things are not going well. I'm sort of wired in such a way as to be able to do those things. And so most organizations deal with both of those things. And so my reputation is sort of that of that person. And so I would say that is a principal way. It's just word of mouth, knowledge of my local community. And I don't really work so much outside of my region, outside the San Diego region. But San Diego is big. It's 3.1 million people live in this county. And so there are lots of opportunities here. The other thing I do is I write a lot on LinkedIn. And so in 2023, one of the motivations that got me to look at consulting again and really get serious about it was I had a return of my heart condition. And it actually caused me to have a stroke in 2023. And I ended up having to have another heart surgery. And during my time off, I took 3 months off. I thought, I don't really want to go back to being a hospital executive. I think I'd rather do what I'm doing on the side and help people and help organizations across a variety of industries and a variety of challenges. I want to spend more time with my family. And very importantly, I need to start capturing the things that I see and I feel in writing. And this is something I deal with a lot when I talk to people, let's call it mid-age or mid-career and higher, is legacy, the issue of legacy. How do you leave a mark or a ripple that continues to expand out maybe after you're gone? And I realized that a lot of the things that I was working on were occurring almost in a vacuum. I would relate with an individual person, but I wasn't sharing the insights with the broader community. And so I decided to start writing on LinkedIn a lot. And so I do that quite a bit. I write a lot on LinkedIn. And what I typically do, and this is the secret for a lot of people who want to make content but aren't making content as far as writing, is narrate it to yourself, record it. Because we talk a lot easier than we write, and it's faster. If you have ideas, what I do is I take my phone and I just record all the time thoughts that come into mind, topics I want to discuss, and then I marinate on it. I call it. I let it sit and I marinate, and I hear a word or two a week or two later, and I go, that's interesting. I will include that in there. And by the time I'm done, I sit down and I have the core of it already laid out because I recorded it. And then I just need to finish writing it. And I try to make sure that I bring in examples from other people, from people I've worked with, from myself, and infuse them into the lessons learned, almost like in grad school, if you did your MBA and you do case studies. You have a principle that applies to it, and then you have an actual experience. And so I do a lot of writing. And that has brought in a number of clients, particularly on the coaching side of things.
That's interesting. Tell me more about LinkedIn. Like, how do you tie writing to biz dev? Like, how do you tie the two together?
I think it's difficult for people to know what is available out there in the world as far as consultants is concerned. And unless you happen to have an interaction with somebody, or you happen to know them personally, or met through work or whatever it may be, they don't know who you are. LinkedIn broadens that audience quite a bit, and you could share with them in a very thoughtful and intentional way how you see the world, what you think, and how you apply those thoughts and those strategies to challenges that people are facing, whether they be individual, professional, or on an organization-wide standpoint. You need to give people insight into how you think. And typically, I found that when people get insight into how I think, they want to talk to me more about those things. And I love that. I literally see every time I have an impact on an organization or a person as me planting a seed somewhere. I don't know if you ever heard the story of Johnny Appleseed, where he would plant seeds and he'd spread apple trees all over. I look at myself that way, is that I'm planting seeds, I'm fertilizing, I'm watering, and at some point it's going to yield results for the person that I'm helping impact, or for the organization that I'm working with. And that is how I get high. I get high seeing people be successful. And in particular, I get high seeing people who come from at-risk backgrounds, which I come from. I get high seeing them realize that they have something inside them that has high potential, and to apply a strategic framework around it, and to work really hard and apply themselves in a way that maybe they've never done before, and then to see them realize their goals for themselves and their families. That's what I like. And that's where I come from. I come from a very rough childhood and difficult circumstances. And so I love seeing people come from that and rise up.
I like that, and that's tying back to the mission-driven that we were mentioning earlier. I'm gonna double down on the topic of LinkedIn, because I think hopefully that will be of value for the audience. And I think a lot of B2B coaches and consultants specifically want to double down on LinkedIn, which is a good thing. But the problem is that most of the time they don't double down the right way. I'm not saying this is your case, Aaron. You seem to have it all properly figured out for your firm. But here is how we typically see LinkedIn. So most people will stop at writing great content, but not necessarily tying this to business. Now, it's still good, right, for authority and credibility, like someone you would get in touch with or referred to, would check you up on LinkedIn and see the post that you're posting and what you're talking about. But ultimately, you don't really have a way to know if you're reaching even the right people with your posts, if this is really having the impact that you want for your business in a sense of growth. Here is how we like to go about it. So you talk about stuff that obviously your audience cares about. So that's content research. That's what your clients are telling you. That's basing yourself on what your ICP, back to the importance of knowing exactly who you're targeting. And then you look at everything that is happening in terms of engagement. So from your posts, who is liking, who is commenting, who is visiting your profile, who is following you after they've consumed some content. And then it's having a proper follow-up system with those people. It's like, hey, not you liked my post, do you want to buy? But more like, hey, I saw that you reacted to a post talking about this specifically. Hey, tell me more. What did you like about this post? Can I send you more resources around how you can be successful on your own with on that specific topic? And you build those relationships. I think most B2B coaches and consultants, unfortunately, they will stop at just putting content out there, rather than going to go and get the business that comes from getting that reach on LinkedIn, which is super important. And so having that content at the top of funnel, but also follow-up process, additional resources you can share, and the right call to action at the right time for like, hey, seems like you're enjoying the stuff and you've consumed all those things. Would it be worth a free consultation or whatever the call to action is typically how you make LinkedIn work really, really well for B2B coaches and consultants. Tell me more about your sales process, Aaron. How do you go from that, so from your LinkedIn awareness and like building credibility, seeing people successful, overall word of mouth, right, which is also something you mentioned was big for you. How do you move from all that to a conversation, a sales conversation, an SOW, a letter of engagement, and let's rock and roll together?
No, it's a great question. So I'm a soft seller. I soft sell everything. I talk people out of working with me sometimes because they're not in the right frame of mind to actually work with me. What you described is what I do. So I put my content online. I will oftentimes send my content in a link via text to people I know that I've worked with. I say, hey, take a look at this article I recently wrote. I'd appreciate if you could share it and maybe comment on it on LinkedIn. And then that way it kind of expands the reach into their network as well. I do get a lot of comments from people online, and I get a lot of private messages that say, hey, can you tell me more about this? And so when people engage, I engage with them. And the way I engage is I am not engaging thinking, how do I sell to this person? I engage thinking, how can I help this person? Is there a way for me to be helpful in their life, even if it's free, even if I do it without getting paid? I want to be helpful in their life. I've helped way, way, way more people for free than I've ever helped getting paid. And so I want to help them. And in the course of talking about it, I invite them out for a coffee, even though I don't drink coffee. We go out for coffee, we go out and we have a conversation, we jump on a Zoom, and I want to hear about the challenge that they're facing. And I offer to provide some guidance. And if it looks like it's the kind of guidance that will be helpful in that moment or in a few conversations, no problem. It's not a big deal. If they want to engage, I usually let them pitch the idea of an engagement. And then they say, what does that look like? And so I lay out for them sort of the general kind of criteria of what it looks like to engage with me. Like with coaching, I sell an initial package of 10 coaching sessions. I don't generally go below that. I sometimes do one-offs, an hour here or 2 hours there, but usually the amount of work that it takes to be prepared for a 1 or 2 hour engagement is as much as it is to do a 10-hour engagement. And if you want to do it well. And so I give them a package, or I talk to them about what it takes to engage me as a fractional executive or whatever it may be. And then I leave it to them. And I don't hard sell them. I just say, listen, if this is something that seems like it's going to work out for you, let me know. And I'll put together a full proposal for you. I'll give you an engagement agreement. I send everybody their engagement agreement via a DocuSign kind of thing. And we close. I mean, I would say of the people I speak with about these things, I probably close 40% of them. The rest are simply not in a place to really engage at a higher level. Maybe they don't need it right at that point. Maybe they don't think they need it, even though they maybe do. Or maybe they're not financially in a place to do it. I try to focus on small to mid-size organizations, companies, municipalities, mainly because I don't want to have to do RFPs. I don't want to respond to requests for proposal and go for, and because typically they're asking you to give them your best ideas in your RFP, and they take your best ideas and they go hire somebody else, for whatever it may be. So I don't like to do that. I like to have personal connections with people. And so, that's sort of how I narrow the funnel. Broadly, funnel, engage people on a meaningful level, have conversations, figure out if it's something that is in alignment, and then close.
Amen to that.
Yes.
So that's marketing and selling. I like it. Obviously, that's my jam, but I'm trying to get, less biased in my interviews. So
Right.
tell me a bit more about retention, Aaron. So once, 40% of those people move forward with you, which is a great
Mhm.
closing rate.
Right.
How do you then retain? How do you, make sure that one engagement transforms into another with the same clients? Like, how do you farm whilst keep on providing value, obviously?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because oftentimes people who engage me are engaging me in a moment of need, like intense need. And so, as an organization, if I'm coming in as an interim CEO, there is an expectation that this is a limited time frame. You're going to be here for 4 months or 6 months or 10 months or a year, whatever it may be, to bridge the divide. And so retention on those is very difficult. It's not something that you're really focusing on. With other organizations, I would say that it's hard to maintain retention if you're dealing with challenging issues. I am a truth speaker. My truth, my understanding of things, and my recommendations, I lay them out. I say, here's what I think we should do, and we should do it. Sometimes that rubs people the wrong way, and particularly if you're working at an organization where there's political overtones. So you say you're working with an organization with an elected board of directors, and they all have different politics and different agendas and things like that are going on. Not saying that nonprofit boards don't have that too, but they just have it less than the political boards do. And so that is a very delicate dance to navigate all those personalities and all those agendas. And so what I generally do is I try to navigate those personalities and agendas the best way that I can, but ultimately I yield to the truth. This is what we need to do. This is what we're working on. And I sort of go into it with the understanding that I'm not going to have a contract after this specific period of time. If it happens to work out that we all are getting along at the end of this thing and it's all good and everything's fine, then I am more than willing to discuss a long-term engagement. I have plenty of long-term engagements. But ultimately, for me, I am not going to limit my recommendations or limit my activity to pacify politics. And that's maybe unique in my particular consulting area and things like that. But that's the way I see it, and I have resolved with myself that I'm okay with that. And I mean, I have situations where people want to do longer term engagements, and I say no. I say no, I'm okay. I think it's fine. I'm going to go do something else, or I just don't see that as being, the greatest opportunity for me to bring all of my talents to the table. I've had situations where I've helped organizations get oodles of media coverage, and half the people there think it's not enough. And so I just kind of say to myself, well, if I'm getting oodles of media coverage, and I know it's oodles of media coverage, and they're not happy with it, they're not going to be happy with anything in the future. So I might as well just go work for somebody else where there's an opportunity to be successful, or at least be perceived to be successful, because I was successful in that. But the perception, there's a chasm that often exists between the perception of something and the reality of it. And so it is my job to manage perception versus reality, but it's also my job to stay true to myself and to choose the clients that I think I have the best opportunity to have meaningful, substantial, sustainable impact.
I mean, you seem to be in a position of quite abundance, which is amazing. You must be doing a thing or two right, Aaron. Let me let me throw a bit of a curveball question at you then. Um, what's your number one challenge? What's the one nut that you're trying to crack that if you crack for galvanized consulting, you're gonna get to the whole next level? What's that one challenge right now?
Scaling. Scaling is my challenge.
Mm.
Um, there's only one me, and there's only so many hours in a day. And I have made a concerted effort to split those hours between my family, number one, and my work, number two. And so there's only so much of me to go around. And I have brought in other people, and they're great at what they do. They're amazing, and they're subject matter experts in particular areas, and they work underneath me and things like that. But the larger scale engagements, there's only one of me. So it's hard to create alliances with other consultants who want to remain relatively independent themselves and be together. I mean, I think there's strength in numbers, and I have other people who work with me, and they're great, and they do amazing work, but they're mostly doing public affairs engagements, or they're doing some coaching engagements. Very few are doing fractional executive work yet. And so I'm trying to get to the point of where I can scale. And I would say there was a challenge that I was facing that I have since overcome. And that was that I said yes too much. I said yes to things too frequently. And including working for some engagements that paid me less than I knew I was worth, what my value was. And so last year I started saying no. I forced myself to say no to scenarios. And what was amazing is that it actually worked really well. I would say no initially. And in the course of negotiating, we would come up with a scenario that was more aligned with where I wanted to be, financially, hours of engagement, whatever it may be. And so now I feel like I have the word no in my arsenal in a way that I never had it before. As somebody who grew up poor, and so my parents had severe drug issues when I was a kid, and that created chaos and trauma and all these things in the household. And so for years, I think I had imposter syndrome, where I was, I need to work that much harder to get to the top, and I'll say yes to anything. Just give it to me. Let me prove myself. And then I had to come to a realization that I had arrived at where I wanted to be, that I was no longer, faking it to make it, right? I actually knew what I was talking about, and that there was tremendous value in the work that I did, and the insight that I was providing. And that because there's only so much of me to go around, you have to say no sometimes, because if you say yes to everything, that time is taken up and you cannot apply it in an area that's better aligned with where you want to go, and maybe financially where you want to be, and things like that. And so, yeah, I mean, ultimately it's scaling and being able to say no in moments when you don't think it's best aligned with your future and where you want to be.
Aaron Byzak, ladies and gentlemen. Aaron, if people want to find out more about you, see what you do, where should they go?
They can go to galvanizedstrategies.com, or they can find me on LinkedIn, Aaron Byzak, Byzak.
We'll put all the links in the description. Sorry for butchering the family name. So Aaron Byzak. I think it's Aaron J. Byzak on LinkedIn. We'll put all the links in the description. What I can say for sure, Aaron, is that you've gained at least one new connection on LinkedIn. Me, I just added you. Aaron, thank you so much for coming on Consulting Leaders.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders Podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.